Safe School webinar series. This is the last one in our series. We had a series of 6, and we've finally arrived at the end. And thank you all for joining us throughout, and welcome to those of you who are new to our series. My name is Mila Kelly, and I'm the coordinator of the Peaks to Prairies Pollution Prevention Center, based in Bozeman, Montana. And before we get started with this presentation today, I just want to make sure you can all hear me. So, and just as a practice for asking questions later in the game, why don't you guys go ahead and raise your hand if you can hear me? You should see a little hand icon. That just gives me a little peace of mind that I'm not talking into a black hole here. All right, good. It looks like everyone can hear me. Great. Well, if you haven't been participating, we had a series of 6 webinars. We talked about school chemical cleanouts. We talked about green cleaning and school renovations. We talked about bullying, restorative practices, first aid, integrated pest management, and we're wrapping up here with a discussion of waste reduction and recycling in our schools. We have partnered through this with EPA and with the Wyoming Department of Education. They've helped us gather the opportunity to have continuing education credits for our participants, and have really helped us get the word out throughout Wyoming. So we really do appreciate that. And just a couple of housekeeping notes for folks on the call before I get started. You are all by default muted, so we can't hear you, but we do want to entertain questions, and we can do that through 2 formats. You can either raise your hand just like you did, and we will call on you during certain periods of the presentation, or you can type a question into the chat, into the question pane, which you should see on your toolbar. It says questions. If you can't see it, you might be able to see it on the top of your toolbar. There's a view option, and if you scroll down there, you should be able to click highlight questions, and that way your question pane should come up, and you can type in your question, and Michelle Gant will collect those questions, and then during a couple of periods during the presentation, we'll stop and entertain questions. You can also, if you raise your hand, we'll unmute your line, and then we can have a discussion, which is also great. So. So with that in mind, for those of you who have applied for continuing education credits, we have been tracking your participation, and we will submit those CEU credits and your attendance to the I can't remember who they go to, but anyway, to the appropriate folks probably next week. So you won't see that on your record this week, but we will get to that next week. So don't worry, you don't need to do anything as long as you've given us your CEU number. We have your participation recorded, and we'll go ahead and submit those for you. So you don't have to worry about that at all. So with that, I think we'll go ahead and get started. Today is a little bit different because usually I moderate and get to listen to a presenter, but today I have the opportunity to give a talk, so I'm excited to do that. So I'll go ahead and get started. Like I said, we are the Peaks to Prairies Pollution Prevention Center, and today we're going to be talking about waste reduction and recycling in schools. Before I get started on that, I just wanted to briefly introduce myself. I have coordinated the Peaks to Prairies Pollution Prevention Center for the last year and a half. Prior to that, I worked as a private consultant on a whole variety of environmental projects, predominantly working with rural communities on creating watershed, stream, and fisheries restoration plans, and implementing those plans based on rural community and environmental priorities. Before that, I received my bachelor's in biology at Tufts University in Boston and completed my master's in resource conservation through the University of Montana School of Forestry. And though I haven't really thought about my master's work for a long time, it's kind of a separate entity from a lot of things that I do now. As I was putting together today's presentation on waste streams, I was suddenly struck by this connection between my riparian science thesis work and waste reduction and life cycle assessment. So if you'll just divulge me for a moment, I just wanted to have this slight diversion. Many years ago, or maybe about 8 years ago, I had the opportunity to work on a study in Southeast Alaska which discovered a critical component to salmon ecology that we had never really considered before. We'd always understood that the health of a salmon stock depended on adequate water flows, unpolluted water, the right amount of suspended sediment, adequate supplies of aquatic and terrestrial insects, and a considerable amount of shade to ensure low and stable stream temperatures, that shade clearly being dependent upon the health of the streamside vegetation. But what we didn't know at the time was that the very health of that streamside vegetation was dependent upon the decomposition of salmon carcasses, which provide nitrogen to the soil. And without those heavy salmon runs and wildlife hauling carcasses up to the shore, the vegetation suffers, and you can kind of understand what that negative feedback loop, how that starts to happen from there. Low salmon runs, lesser nitrogen availability, lower plant growth, less shade attenuation, higher water temperatures, lower runs. You can just see how that really starts to feed back on itself. And I was considering that as I was, considering our waste streams, and was really being reminded of the importance of considering a full life cycle approach to all that we do, and considering the unforeseen consequences of our actions, the fact that sometimes life's a lot more complicated than it first appears, and we're really going to delve into how that relates to schools today. So I guess it's from salmon streams to waste streams, I suppose. I just thought about that. So as an overview, we're going to talk about a few things, well, lots of things today, but we're going to hit it in this type of format. It's our constantly relevant triangle of reduce, reuse, recycle, reducing being the most important one and the one that we can tend to forget about. We're going to talk about energy efficiencies, paper, lunch, and air pollutants. These are really the big players for schools. We're going to talk about recycling, the basics, as well as EWaste, Mercury, and environmental procurement. We're going to talk about special activities. These are really just opportunities to bring about awareness to the school community, just fun, insightful, revenue building. Sometimes these can be local fundraisers, Earth Day celebrations. I'll talk about some ideas for that. And then finally we'll wrap up with strategies for success, how we can make these things happen. And again, if you've got questions, I'll stop in between these overall topics, and you can ask me some questions, and we'll go through some answers, hopefully. So we're going to start with reduction. I like to say to change your light bulbs and to go 1 or 2 or 3 steps further. We can't change the world by changing light bulbs, but we can make a dent. Commercial buildings consume more than 1/3 of all the energy generated in the U.S. That's 1/3 of all the energy generated in the U.S., and lighting is the biggest culprit. And of those commercial buildings, schools represent the largest non-residential building sector. We probably all know this, but replacing incandescent bulbs with Energy Star CFLs can really have an enormous impact. These bulbs are 3 to 4 times more efficient than standard incandescent bulbs. But let's think of this really as the first step in the process or the continuum of energy conservation. Installing programmable thermostats. If you haven't already done this in your schools, prioritize this on your list of necessary school upgrades. This can have an enormous impact. And something small that you may not have already considered is changing all of your exit signs to be LED powered. These are real simple things you can get done quickly. Get a handle on your phantom plug load. Phantom plug load is really just a euphemism for the way devices use and waste electricity when they aren't even on or when they're not being used. And they're everywhere. They're things that we might not even stop to think about, things like printers or vending machines. These can eat up to 20% of your total energy costs. So where do these come from? What can you do? There are devices, like you'll see at the bottom. I don't know if you can see my pointer on this, but on the bottom it's called Kill a Watt. And these are little devices that you can just plug into your power outlet and test how much, what the load is from that particular appliance or a printer if you plugged your printer in there. The first step towards conservation is having feedback on how much you consume. So that is one great way to do it. Another way to get a handle on your plug load is using smart power strips. These are power strips that you can see in the lower left corner that can cut the power when your devices are off, so you don't have any more phantom plug load. Simple things like unplugging your cell phone charger when they're not in use can make a bigger difference than you think. And in a school setting, having all of the teachers and staff turn off their computers and power down their computer labs is critical. And often what we need to do in a school setting is to assign a particular administrative staff member to be responsible for this, because we all forget, and particularly when we're talking about office printers. At the end of the day, if you have someone assigned to do it, you know that the task will get done. Another big energy efficiency savings within the schools are our air handling systems. These should be inspected and proactively maintained. I know in Montana, at least, many school air handling systems were boarded up in the 1970s when we had the energy crisis at that time, and some of these have never been unboarded. Clean and properly maintained systems function much more efficiently than those that are not being maintained. Controlling your exhaust fans, particularly in science classrooms. Chemical lab vents are, when energy audits are conducted, are often found to be one of the largest culprits of your heated air escaping your environment. It's just like leaving your front door open on a cold day. So if you haven't already done so, conduct an energy audit. Northwest Energy will conduct an audit for free if they do service your region. If they don't, in all likelihood, your local provider will do the same. And benchmark with other schools. What are you paying? Find out what other schools are paying. An average for schools is the energy companies will say is about 75 cents a square foot. If you're over $1 a square foot, you have a problem. And some schools can have been able to get down to 40 cents a square foot. I've talked with numerous schools that are currently running at $1.40 a square foot, and this is a square foot for their facilities over the year. And if you think about $1.40 a square foot versus 75 cents a square foot, which is kind of the average, you can think of the money that can be saved on a district basis. Just looking at those numbers on say a 10,000 square foot facility, we're talking about $8,500. So the savings is remarkable. And these are things that can be done, the things that we just mentioned on a pretty quick and easy basis. And energy prices aren't going down, and I think that gives us a really strong tool for advocating for energy efficiencies in our school or district, if not for nothing else, than to save that money. With the low-hanging fruit we just mentioned, you can drop 30 to 40% off the top without even breaking a sweat, without going further than just the easy stuff. So develop with these benchmarks in mind, figuring out what other schools are looking at, working with other superintendents, develop an energy management plan. Prioritize your projects, your long-term versus immediate, those that you're going to get the most bang for your buck, and those that you're really going to need some time to fund the capital, like replacing your windows and insulation, those types of things. Make energy efficiencies part of the job description for your facility managers. A lot of managers that I've spoken with feel like they are, if they're spending time researching energy efficiencies, then they're providing a disservice to the staff and children. If they're not doing any kind of facilities maintenance at that time, then they aren't really doing their job. And so I think it's important to really make that part of your job description for your managers. And that really goes along with training your staff and talking about the importance of that, talking about the energy savings that can be accrued and the financial savings as well. So let's talk about water consumption. Water consumption is really not the top waste producer at schools, but it's still important nonetheless, especially in our arid regions like Wyoming. And this can really be a fun project for your science classes. Consider it, just conducting a water audit. What are your water consumption habits at your school? Do your faucets drip? And again, this is something that science classes can do. Are your bathroom sinks left on? Do you have waterless urinals, low-flow toilets? What's your landscaping? Are you using salt versus sand on your sidewalk? Salt is considered a pollutant once it's entered into the stormwater system. And kids can do this, and they have done it in other schools. The children can report back to the facilities managers, gives kids an opportunity to see a project from the start to fruition. They're fact-finding, they're presenting it to administrative personnel, they're seeing action. It's really an excellent exercise in project management. Okay, paper. The typical office generates about 1.5 pounds of paper waste per employee per day, and this is really a lot higher once we get into the school setting for obvious reasons. It's our mode of communication between school staff and parents, and it's also our method of teaching. But here's some ideas to help reduce our paper consumption in schools. The first is to reduce handouts to parents, double-sided printing or using half sheets, and going to a more web-based system, a district system or school system. And one idea for encouraging people or getting people started in becoming more comfortable in looking at the website, or reminding them that they should look at the website instead of waiting for the paper that comes home, or to consider doing daily email announcements, and then a monthly or a bi-weekly newsletter every other week. Encouraging email or district website postings. Many schools have instituted policies regarding community bulletins, where community bulletins are no longer sent home with the students, and rather they're only posted on the website. And if we just think about the impact of that, if you've got only 100 students in your school and you eliminate half the paper used in your weekly newsletters alone, you're saving 2,000 sheets of paper per year. And if we multiply that by a district or a state or a national basis, we're really talking about a lot of paper when we consider that we've got about 60 million students in our country through the elementary and secondary levels. Okay, from here we're going to move on to lunches. Cafeterias and lunchrooms are one of the most significant sources of waste in our school, and we're going to talk about some of those aspects. And one aspect, of course, we're never going to reach no-waste lunches, and that's just sort of, again, another euphemism that's used to describe efforts to reduce our lunch waste. But the first sort of strategy that schools have considered is considering a recess followed by a lunch schedule. And what this means is that schools around the country have noted a considerable waste reduction when kids have had the opportunity to exercise and don't feel as rushed getting out the door to go to recess. And there was a recent article in the New York Times and a National Public Radio news story just last week that had compiled some not so surprising results, and this has really rejuvenated this movement, that when children play before lunch, there's less food waste and a higher consumption of the good stuff, of milk, water, fruit, and vegetables, particularly water. And some also somewhat surprising results are that teachers report less behavior problems, and they're finding that they have an average they have added 15 minutes to their classroom instruction time by having children have recess before lunch. And this is really just attributed to, as they say, getting the wiggles out. When children come in from recess, and come immediately into the classroom, it takes a long time for kids to settle down. And by opposing those schedules, they're getting 15 minutes of extra classroom time a day. In addition, nurses are report fewer headaches and stomach aches simply because kids are eating more. They're having a longer opportunity to sit. and digest. In Montana, our superintendent of public instruction is Denise Juneau, and she's recently recommended this as the best practice for schools around the state. And it sounds simple and it seems really straightforward, but there are issues that need to be worked through with any kind of change in schedule, and some of these fairly significant issues are ensuring that hand sanitizers are properly placed within the lunchroom, so there's some those need to be purchased. And also, if you're in a district where many children are coming to school hungry, this switch may not work because an earlier lunch schedule is preferable. And the second item here is an offer versus served program, and again, it sounds real simple, but it's not often done in a lot of our schools. And this is really a program where children choose the food that they would like to consume. It's simple stuff. In the LA school district, which is granted a gigantic school district, they saved 13,000 tons, which equated to $600,000 in waste disposal cost in 1 year by moving to this program. So if you see the pictures on the left are clearly not an offer versus served program versus the picture on the right-hand side where children are having the opportunity to choose what they would like to eat for lunch. Say no to polystyrene. And I put this in here. Polystyrene is manufactured from petroleum, as I'm sure we all know. It's highly flammable, and a chemical called benzene, which is actually a known human carcinogen, is used in its production. Styrofoam, and Styrofoam is the more common name for it. It can be recycled, but typically only the clean packaging material can be recycled, and it really can only be recycled in a very, very few facilities in the United States. So for all intents and purposes, it's not a recyclable material. So for those of you who are still using Styrofoam trays and plates, and I know that there's a lot of schools out there that are doing this, prioritize this for your schools. The Chicago Public School System threw away 250,000 polystyrene breakfast and lunch trays every day, 5 million a month. So they instituted a massive effort to switch to reusable trays, and they've saved hundreds of thousands of dollars. Not to mention the environmental impact of that kind of volume of waste going into the waste stream. Also providing metal utensils, biodegradable cups and napkins. Also very, very important to reducing waste in the school lunchroom. The other aspect of these zero waste, low waste cafeterias are home lunches. Children bringing home lunch from home create about 6 pounds of waste annually, 18,000 pounds of home lunch that's wasted annually for an average size elementary school. When you think about an average disposal cost of about $20 a ton, this really does add up. And you can start to mitigate that by informing parents on how home lunches can be zero waste. Simple tips like avoiding single-serving packaging, refillable bottles versus juice boxes and containers, cloth napkins. That's actually putting a cloth napkin in the child's lunch container, reusable containers, metal utensils, and a pack-it-in, pack-it-out mentality. Many families, especially in our rural states, have compost piles at home for gardens or for chickens or for pigs to feed, those kinds of things. And creating that mentality of pack it in, pack it out can really dramatically reduce food waste. It can go into compost piles or feeding the farm animals, or just bringing awareness to the parents too for how much lunch their children is actually eating. And this can be accomplished. These sort of zero waste home lunches. All of these things are aspects within the school that can be accomplished through education at virtually no cost to the school district, but yet it can save the school district a lot of money in waste disposal costs. Of course, there's always going to be waste, so what's the best way to handle that? Here's a few examples. Sorting for recyclables and compost, sorting out the styrofoam from the trash. I'm not sure why they do that. ensuring that there's a bin for compost, and then going beyond that and creating compost areas within the school or within the school grounds. Composting in gardens can be a real challenge in our area due to long winters and relatively short growing seasons. However, it has been done in some communities in our area with real positive effects, and really this just depends on your community's commitment. It depends on what kind of opportunities there are for kids or families to work during the summer, whether there's opportunities to take those vegetables that have been cared for during the summer and bring them to markets or distribute them around to the school families or to folks that are helping out in the schools. So really it takes a concentrated effort, and it takes a group of passionate parents and staff as well. But they have been done with really remarkably positive effects around our region. Another component of composting that we often overlook, especially when it's hard to imagine anything green actually growing around here, is grass cycling or compost programs for your grass clippings. One school that I'm aware of diverted 8,000 tons of grass from their waste stream in 1 year. And the city of Cheyenne, and I believe that's the only city I know of in Wyoming specifically, but the city of Cheyenne actually has regulations prohibiting grass clippings in the landfill, so they're actually requiring you to compost that material. And my final point on the food front is the local foods and the farm-to-school programs. These are programs that work directly with local farmers and food producers to bring their food to the cafeteria table. And I think we can all really easily understand what the benefits of these are. Decreasing the distance between producers and consumers only promotes food security while reducing our reliance on oil and reducing our greenhouse gases. Anything that we can do to strengthen our children's and our community's knowledge about agriculture, food, nutrition, the environment is always a positive aspect for the children as well as for our local, especially our rural communities. Increasing our children's participation in the school's meal program and consumption of fruits and vegetables improves their nutrition and everything else that comes from that. And also, when these programs are implemented successfully and planning and menu choices are made consistent with the seasonal availability of fresh and minimally processed foods, it can actually be a benefit for school food budgets. I wish I had this statistic for Wyoming, but in Montana, there's a statistic that if each household in Montana spent just $10 a week on Montana-produced food, we would redirect $186 million each year to the state's food producers. That is an enormous amount of money. So at the same time, we're supporting economic development across numerous sectors within our local economy. And my last point here is that each food vendor, that hormone-free milk is available from each food vendor, and that can be demanded by the schools. And organic produce is not always available from your food vendor, but the more and more that you request those options to become available, the more the vendors will see that that's important to our communities. So I'm just going to briefly talk about one other aspect of reducing, and that is the reduction of air pollutants. And this is, again, another really easy way to reduce our waste that can be implemented with a simple task of posting a few signs. And this is instituting a no idling policy that would apply to parents as well as buses. And you can see here there's many communities around the country that are working hard to make this a reality in for their school. And the reason why it's so important is that unlike adults, children's lungs are still in development. And because of that, they breathe 50% more air per pound of body weight than adults. Children are closer to the ground, which means they're closer to the tailpipe, so they're breathing in a higher proportion of polluted air than we are. My school, for example, can have up to 50 cars waiting in line after school for the afternoon pickup. And with all those engines running, it's a lot of pollution being pumped into the air that can easily be taken care of. So that was my main points that I wanted to talk about for reduction. And I wanted to just pause for a moment and see if there were any questions that I could answer for you.
So here's the first one, Mila.
Okay.
Do you recommend a waste survey, i.e. dumpster diving, to look for opportunities and effectiveness of waste management at a school?
Well, dumpster diving, yeah. I remember doing that in college when I was really poor. You know, I talk a little bit about that in the recycling aspect as one way that children can have a really great an opportunity to see what is in the waste stream. So yes, I mean I think the first step, and that can be done at a variety of different levels. It can be students working on doing waste audits within the school system, and that's looking at what kind of recyclables are being thrown out, and it's also looking at what kind of waste is happening without us really even knowing it, like leaky faucets, and something that students probably can't do, but are some of these energy audits. So I think those are all just components of understanding what's going on in your waste stream.
How can you find out where you can recycle CFLs in your community?
Good question, and again, I'm going to be talking about that because I have a great resource for folks in Wyoming regarding recycling. However, the bad news is that a lot of our rural states, and particularly Wyoming, is it's very difficult to recycle mercury bulbs or bulbs with mercury in them without that onus being placed on the recycler. So there are ways that you can send them back to the manufacturer and box them up, but that is on your dime. As far as I know, in Wyoming, there are not currently any places that are taking mercury bulbs. So it's a little bit disappointing, or a little bit challenging, I should say.
Okay, I've got one more. What is the difference between efficiency and conservation?
The difference between efficiency and conservation. Let's see. I would say that I think that we can conserve through efficiency. So I think efficiency is really one aspect of conservation, if that makes sense.
Okay. I think that's it for this section.
Okay. Okay, great. Well, then I'm gonna move on to the recycling component of this presentation. This is going to include, we're going to talk a little bit about environmental procurement policies, the basics of recycling programs, EWaste, as well as mercury bulbs. So I wanted to throw this in. I didn't really have quite the appropriate section to do it, but I did just want to bring your awareness to product purchasing and what we often refer to as EPP, or environmentally preferable procurement. There are many school districts, counties, cities that are in the process of improving or greening their procurement processes. Some school districts across the country are implementing quite stringent regulations on procurement and requiring green cleaners, all kinds of green products into the school systems. So how do you know what to buy? And I wanted to mention these because you don't have to become an expert in green. You don't have to understand necessarily the ins and outs of greenwashing. You don't have to know what kind of paper is best, what kind of cleaner is non-toxic, what towels are most recycled. That's just, it's a task that is beyond the time availability for most of us. And as a result, there are these third-party certification programs that exist to help you make these purchasing decisions. One, and this is the most common one in the U.S., is Green Seal. It's a nonprofit standard-setting organization that's dedicated to improving the indoor environment. And the second is EcoLogo. This is the Environmental Choice Program. This is based in Canada, and they're a little bit ahead of us as far as requiring the use of green products within schools, industries, governments, all that all of our businesses. These first two programs are really considered to be the leading authorities in North America. They're nonprofit, they're science-based, and they do the testing. They do third-party testing on a whole variety of products. And the third is EPA's Design for the Environment, which is a partnership program where EPA works with industry sectors to find alternative products which reduce environmental and health risks. And I wanted to point out that these programs certify all kinds of products from cleaners, glass cleaners, all-purpose cleaners, carpet cleaners, to hand soap, paper towels, napkins, tissue paper, office products, damp mop cleaners, compostable trash liners. And so they're an excellent resource to go to for making some of these decisions. The basic programs of recycling, these would include paper, plastic, cardboard, aluminum, and glass. Each district will have unique challenges here, and I know that starting a recycling program sounds easier than it can be in reality, especially in our rural areas. In Wyoming, there are very few private recyclers, and those that do exist are strictly confined to confidential documents, so your shredding companies and your scrap metal companies. However, if your community has a city or a county recycling company, schools can use them. And if your budget can't accommodate the dollar amount that curbside pickup will cost each month, some schools have used parents or business sponsorships to fund those programs per month, and then highlighted those sponsorships in the newsletters, or also requested parent advisory council, or whatever their particular school, whatever you call it in your particular school, but using those parent advisory council funds to fund a recycling program. Schools have found that in order for the paper recycling to be a success, that each classroom needs to be provided with a bin for mixed paper recycling, and this really does ensure a greater likelihood of success. And if you take nothing else away from this talk, I wanted you to take this. There's a great document that's been developed by Peak Environmental Services located in Green River, Wyoming, and many of you are probably familiar with it, but it's sort of the who, what, where of recyclers in Wyoming. You can get it as a hard copy, or you can get it online. It's called the Wyoming Recycling Directory, and it's a 70-page document from Afton to Worland. It talks about who recycles what. It's updated yearly, and it's kind of a complicated link because it is updated yearly, but you can find it on the Wyoming DEQ website, and I will also post that link on our website. But it's just a great resource to find out where to go to do your recycling. And one other quick note, too, on this is that if you go through a lot of beverage containers, you should consider an ongoing grant program that's offered by Coca-Cola, actually, for beverage recycling bins. It's a grant program. You just submit what your needs are for beverage containers, and they will review your application and send you some free beverage container recycling bins. And that's called, and then you can find that at www.bingrant.org. Printer cartridges are a large component of schools' waste streams. 25 million printer cartridges go to the landfills each month, and manufacturing and refilling those cartridges takes tens of thousands of tons of plastics and metals, prevents them from entering the waste stream. There are many places in Wyoming and throughout the country that recycle and refill printer cartridges. It's just a matter of knowing where to go, and again, you can refer to that Wyoming Recycling Directory to figure out what to do with those. And from here, we're going to move on to EWaste. This is kind of the bad apple of waste, of our waste streams. EWaste is a term that's used to cover almost all types of electrical and electronic equipment that has or could enter the waste stream. So basically, we're talking about TVs, computers, mobile phones, white goods like fridges, washing machines, dryers, home entertainment and stereo systems, toys, toasters, kettles, basically any household or business item that has a circuitry or an electrical component. And schools create a lot of e-waste. E-waste is an exponentially growing problem. We have rapid product innovations in our electronics and office equipments, and that combined with moving from analog to digital technologies, flat screen TVs and computer monitors, all of these are fueling the increase in our e-waste. Economies of scale, too, have given way to lower prices for many electrical goods, and that has increased the global demand for many products that eventually end up as e-waste. The U.S. EPA has estimated a 5 to 10% increase in the generation of e-waste each year globally. And the U.S. generates approximately 2 tons of e-waste per year, with only about 12.5% collected for recycling. And globally, that number is even lower. So where's the rest going? The 88%. Well, that's a big question, and a lot of that e-waste is going into rudimentary processing facilities without the proper care being taken to deal with some of the nasty byproducts of our e-waste. Some of it's going into illegal trade, and a lot of it, frankly, is going into the landfills. I would say the vast majority of that. And what's the big deal with this? Why are we concerned, and what's the problem? Electrical waste contains hazardous, but it also contains valuable and scarce materials. In fact, up to 60 elements from the periodic table can be found in some of our complex electronics. One of these toxic substances is cadmium, which is used in rechargeable computer batteries and in our monitors. Cadmium bioaccumulates in the environment and is extremely toxic to humans. It particularly accumulates in our kidneys and bones. PVC, polyvinyl chloride, is cabling is used for our circuit boards, connectors, plastic covers that we have on our monitors and cables. And when PVC is burnt or landfill, these PVCs release dioxins that affect human reproductive and immune systems. Mercury is another component of almost all of our e-waste. It's used in lighting devices within our flat screen displays, and mercury causes damage to the nervous system, kidneys, brains, and can be passed on through a mother's breast milk. Electrical goods contain other substances like lead, beryllium, brominated flame retardants, PCBs, polychlorinated biphenyls. A mobile phone, for example, can contain over 40 elements. They contain base metals, special metals, precious metals, silver, gold, all kinds of things. So it's very important to dispose of e-waste properly, but what does that mean, and what do we do? Currently, Wyoming does not have restrictions on what can go into the landfill, and I think that this will inevitably change over time as we see some of the impacts into our groundwater supply. But the current economic realities make it just really difficult for counties and cities, especially in rural areas, to deal with their e-waste. And so as a result, I think many regulatory agencies have not been willing to say, yes, you need to recycle your e-waste. So what can we do? Well, the first thing is probably to talk to your legislators. I think we all need to realize the importance and of processing our e-waste correctly, and to talk to people about that, talk to whoever you can. Most manufacturers have some type of take-back program, but you do need to do the research on that, and you do need to it's on your dime to send it back. So that can be pricey for folks. Charity and donations are certainly one avenue for getting rid of your e-waste, or for donating or having it reused again. Many churches will have programs where they will strip off your hard drive and clean it, make sure it's clean, and then give that to somebody who needs a computer. City or county efforts. I know in Wyoming periodically there are some e-waste collections, but they are few and far between at this time, and that is the same for states around the region. And there are some reputable e-waste recycling companies. There's one in Cheyenne, but you do need to pay for that, and it can be a little bit pricey. So it's kind of an ongoing problem. There's not really a clear solution, but there are some opportunities for recycling some of our e-waste. And on a positive note, for those Olympic fans out there, you'll be happy to know that for the first time in history, Olympic medals contain gold, silver, and copper recovered from end-of-life electronics destined for the landfill. So I was really excited to hear about that. It's a tiny, tiny percentage. I think gold has the greatest percentage, which is 1.5%, but of the gold medal is has been processed from end-of-life electronics. So it's a tiny percentage, but it's unprecedented nonetheless, and so that's kind of exciting. And with those challenges in mind, I wanted to bring this program to your attention. It's a great program. In 2009, a source reduction grant was awarded to the Northeast Recycling Council to introduce and support the State Electronics Challenge in EPA's Region 8. And EPA's Region 8 is Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, Wyoming, Colorado, and Utah. It's a resource for school districts to help manage your electronics responsibly, including purchasing green computers, energy conservation, proper recycling at the end of their useful life. It's a voluntary free program, and schools or whoever is interested joins as a partner. The partner, so say the school district, commits to take action to reduce their environmental footprint of their computers and electronics, but in return they receive technical assistance and tools from EPA and from the Recycling Council. It is a program that is just getting going in Region 8, so it's very timely. There is a teleconference, call on March 11th. You need to RSVP by March 8th to that contact there, Lynn Rubenstein. With that, you can participate in a teleconference, which just gives you the information about what being a partner means. Currently, they have 4 partners, the Montana Department of Environmental Quality, North Dakota Department of Health, Natrona County in Wyoming, and the City of Vermilion in South Dakota. So your school district, your county could easily become one of these. They're looking for partners, so just keep that in mind as a resource. And the last bit of recycling that I'm going to talk about today is mercury, and we touched on that a little bit in the questions. But as we all know, mercury is used in lighting devices. It's used in our CFLs and our fluorescents, and while being much more efficient, mercury is toxic. We know that exposures can cause kidney, brain, and nervous system impairments. And due to the health concerns surrounding mercury, the official statement by Wyoming DEQ is that recycling fluorescent bulbs is highly recommended, and it's required actually for some facilities, schools not being one of them, and in many other states around the country, but it is not required currently in Wyoming. Crushing bulbs is allowable, as are prepaid recycling by mail for those facilities that are required to recycle. This is currently a cost and an inconvenience that's borne by the schools. There's not currently a place in Wyoming that will take the bulbs. So, for example, if you see the box on the lower right, or if you see the box in the picture on the left where the folks are unpacking the mercury bulbs, those boxes, there's no place currently in Wyoming that you can bring your bulbs to where they will stockpile bulbs and send them back once the box is full. That does exist in some other states around the country, but that doesn't yet exist in Wyoming. So basically, those bulbs need to be housed at the school, and the school needs to pay for their transport to a mercury processing facility. So there are also some bulb crushers that are out there. There is not currently a place in Wyoming that I know of that will take bulbs, but the technology does exist where bulbs can be crushed safely. If you look at that top box, where bulbs can be crushed and then the mercury is removed safely into another component of the machine. So there are avenues, but they're a little bit few and far between currently in our region. Any questions, Michelle?
Sorry.
That's okay.
Yes, I have a couple. Do TV screens and computer monitors contain lead, and if so, can children be exposed when they are broken?
Boy, that's a good question. I can't say definitively the answer one way or the other. I do know when they're, when something like that is in a landfill and breaks down by the machinery components breaking apart, that yes, they do. The lead is exposed, and so I would imagine that there is a proper protocol for dealing with that if something like that is broken in your home, just as there are very definitive protocols for cleaning up a CFL bulb if a lamp falls over and your CFL bulb breaks, particularly if you're in a carpeted area. Vacuuming is, I think if I remember it right, the last thing you want to do, but it does need to be cleaned up properly, and there are protocols for that.
Are CFL bulbs universal waste?
They are not considered universal waste right now because they can be just, as far as I understand, they can just be, well, it depends on the state, I suppose. Some states might have more stringent regulations than others, but Wyoming, for example, is you can dispose of them in your garbage through your normal waste stream.
If you use Coke's recycling program, are you required to also offer Coke products?
Boy, when I checked that out, I did not see any stipulations saying that you need to use their products, but the little beverage container does clearly say, as you can imagine, Coca-Cola on the side. But I didn't see any requirements that you need to actually purchase their products. And that those bins are available too for recycling programs that are just getting started and for those that are currently in place. So if you're just needing to expand your program, or if you have a particular event that's coming up where you anticipate, having a huge amount of beverage containers, then the program is applicable for you too.
Okay, last one. Can cell phones be recycled for cash?
They can. There are, and I believe that Wyoming directory does have some resources for that, for particular areas that are particular vendors that will take those in, and they are, and in fact, it can be a fundraiser for some schools.
Okay, that's all I've got.
Okay. Well, I want to spend a couple of minutes just talking about some special events, and these are, as I mentioned earlier, just opportunities to bring about awareness to the school community. These can be fun, they can be insightful, and they can actually build revenue within your school community. Localized fundraisers are an opportunity for schools to raise money while supporting your local food and agriculture producers, healthy, locally grown products, or businesses or artists, whatever it is that your particular region or school community has to offer. For example, community art markets, farm-to-school fundraisers, meat or egg shares, yard sales, auctions, local businesses, services, or items. So these are avenues by participating in these types of fundraising programs or organizing these types of fundraising programs. You're supporting your community, your local people, your local agriculture producers, rather than shuttling a large portion of your fundraiser money off to a large corporation such as Sally Foster. I know that's a big one in schools, or your popcorn vendors, your wrapping paper, a corporation that makes these things thousands of miles away. Many schools have really thought creatively and outside the box on how they can localize these efforts. Farm-to-school fundraisers have included using or selling produce from the community, or selling, in Montana we grow a lot of lentils, so selling lentils and barley that are grown within the state, and typically they happen around Christmas time, so there's often a lot of options that can be given as gifts, and this can happen too through a community or an art market where rather than deciding to host a Sally Foster fundraiser, you decide to canvas the community for art and for their creative projects, and those and some of those proceeds can go back to the school. So those are just a couple of ideas of different ways schools have started to really try and localize their efforts. Another opportunity to bring about awareness with regards to our waste stream is Earth Day. It's coming up. You can call it Earth Day, you can call it Earth Week, Earth Month, whatever works for your project. And some of the great ideas that I'm familiar with include a Recycle Week contest. This works particularly well if you don't already have a recycling program in place. You can use classrooms or grades that can compete with one another to see, to really canvas and figure out what is in their waste stream and to figure out how they can remove the most that they can, the most recyclables that they can from the waste stream that's coming out of their classrooms. Another example is a recycle or reuse drive, and this is collecting cell phones. And as someone asked, yes, those can be collected and given back to a variety of vendors for cash. Collecting cell phones, printer cartridges, batteries, waste audits also conducted by the students. These can include a water audit or an energy audit, a lunch audit, lots of the things that we talked about, and it gives students an opportunity to really become engaged with what's going on in their school. Biked and walking to school week, month, whatever day has also proven to be a really popular avenue for just bringing about awareness regarding waste reduction and in the form of transportation. And another idea is non-toxic cleaner parties. This makes a really good class, science class project during Earth Week, and students can make different non-toxic cleaners and then test those against conventional cleaners and see what they think. So success, how do we get these at our school? How do we get conservation and pollution prevention and some of these waste management ideas implemented into our schools? The first thing is really probably most importantly to educate your children and to really build these principles of waste management and of understanding waste streams and building these principles into the culture of your school family. Incorporating the science of climate change, watershed processes, water quality, ecosystem functioning into your curriculum, both your science curriculum and your social science curriculum. Inspiring change through reading assignments and encouraging action through planned activities and clubs. And you can see this photo of a student-led group that decided they wanted to take on the Styrofoam at their school, and encouraging that action and allowing it to happen and play out. And beyond that, it's really all about relationships. In order for any of these strategies that we've talked about, relationships are probably the most important component. There has to be a team with designated leaders, that have a job in order for these to move forward, that have a particular task that needs to be carried out. If you don't have a team that incorporates, everybody from your parents to your staff to your administrative personnel to your maintenance staff, no matter how great your ideas are, they're much less likely to succeed. And along with that, embrace your squeaky wheel. Whoever it is, if it's the mom who just can't stand the Styrofoam, give them a mission and have them, perhaps that particular person could conduct or organize a cost and effort analysis. Embrace their passion and use that passion. Obtain support from your school board, your superintendent, and principals. That support is really critical for enacting lasting change by establishing policies for purchasing, cleaning, recycling, whatever it is. Without those policies, without that have been enacted, your hard work can really just disappear with a change in staffing, and you'd hate to make some progress forward and then all of a sudden be taken back just because a policy hadn't been created or because a new staff person wasn't apprised of some of the great efforts that you had made. Building and maintenance staff are a critical part of many of these discussions. For many schools, the facilities managers, well, they're almost always working on too many more things than they can handle, but or than they really have time for. But ensuring that that they're in on these discussions from the beginning is really critical in getting these strategies incorporated. And those are the folks that know how best to organize a recycling drive and where your recycling bins are going to go and where a compost facility or a bin might be possible on the grounds, and all of those kinds of things. Those folks are really implemental in making it happen. So here are some of the incentives for schools to reduce waste. You know, time and again throughout this presentation, I've talked about costs and saving your school money. So I think we hit on that. But I also wanted to hit on available grant sources. There's quite a few out there, and I just wanted to highlight a few. As far as agencies are concerned, state or federal agencies, EPA Region 8 has Resource Conservation Challenge funds. The person to contact there is Ben Betts. They have 4 priority areas: municipal solid waste recycling, greening electronics, industrial materials recycling, and priority chemicals reduction. I'm not sure when that grant comes up, but that's a good one for school systems. EPA Region 8 also has source reduction grants. Linda Walters is your contact there in Denver. Those grants just came out and closed, I believe, in February, but they come out every year, and there's a variety of the priorities change every year, but they always are related to some type of greening initiative, whether it's greening local government or sustainable agriculture, those types of priorities. EPA Headquarters Innovation Initiative, these are commonly called our IWG grants. Again, Ben Betts is the contact person there, and all these grants are listed on the EPA grants homepage. And this is cool. This is called the America's Greenest School.com. And this is an opportunity for students across the U.S. To submit an entry that illustrates their ideas for making their school a greener place. It doesn't have to have happened yet. It just has to. It's kind of an idea board for kids to get engaged. And the winning entry receives a hybrid school bus, a green audit from a LEED accredited professional, and approximately $20,000 for their school to use towards a green makeover. So this is a really, really cool program, and responses are due March 8th. So check that out. Also, the USDA periodically has rural development funds that are applicable for most of our regions for most of our communities in Region 8. And you can find those funding opportunities at www.rurdev.usda.gov, and also the SEC Challenge program that I mentioned earlier, the State Environmental Challenge program. This presentation will be posted probably on Friday on our website. So if you miss any of these websites or these links, you can check it out on our website. And also, if you have a question before we get that posted, if you want to just email me too, I'll get those links and contacts to you. So there's a lot of great incentive opportunities that are coming up right now in March. So and that is quite often the case for schools. They want to try and get some funding out so schools can gear up for the following year. And the final thing is, as far as incentives are concerned, that there's a number of award programs that occur through EPA, through Green School, through Healthy School programs, and aside from that, just the support, I think, from the school community and from your population centers, from your cities and counties. I think once you start down this road, and if you can manage to to really enact some change, and you're able to publicize that and get credit for that, I think you'd probably be amazed at the amount of the number of people that come forward to support you and just to thank you and to give you accolades, just for taking a step in the right direction. I wanted to close by giving you a couple of additional resources that are always available. There's the Wyoming Department of Environmental Quality, the Solid and Hazardous Waste Division, the Wyoming Solid Waste Recycling Association, the Montana Healthy School website. This is something that that my program is working on, and just getting a variety of resources posted on all of the things that we talked about during our webinar seminars: school chemical cleanouts, green cleaning, integrated pest management, just trying to pull those resources together, because I know it's difficult to find those all in one place at one time. Another great resource is newdream.org. They have good information for schools and for really anything related to environmental purchasing and strategies for waste reduction. Greenschools.net and Green Schools Alliance are some additional programs that have worked hard to put resources together to be a service to school districts. And then, of course, I am always available as a resource, as is Matt Langenfeld, who's really helped us put this series of webinars together, and he's the Region 8 Chemical Initiative Coordinator in Denver, and he's always a great resource. If he doesn't know the answer to your question, he will know what department and what direction of EPA to kind of point you in the direction of. And I am also always available for those types of questions. Again, our presentations will be posted on the Peaks to Prairies website. And with that, I'll just see if anybody has any further questions.
I have a few here. Are industry partnerships possible for conducting waste audits or chemical inventories?
I assume by that question, I'm assuming that person means partnering with not agency industries, but actual. So for example, Northwest Energy would be an industry group that will conduct audits at your school and inventories. Let's see, there are other state programs that are sometimes given funds to do additional types of audits. So for example, an asthma program or the Department of Agriculture might receive funds for doing integrated pest management, and those funds will will provide staff expertise to actually go and do walkthroughs at facilities. As far as, and as I was saying, there's sometimes indoor air quality programs, asthma programs are given additional funding to do indoor air quality assessments within schools. So periodically those funds are available, and I would say too that many of these can be done simply through the expertise of your facilities and maintenance managers, and an additional importance of just in addition to just knowing where you're at with some of these, so with water conservation or with your energy efficiencies, in addition to just understanding where your school stands, conducting some type of audit, whether it's done through your facility manager or whether it's done through your energy provider, gives you a benchmark for one, and it also gives you a place to start when you start looking for these additional funds. EPA and all agencies want to see, when grant funds are provided, they want to see what kind of return they're getting on their grant investment. And so if you, at the outset, have a really good handle on what your waste stream is and what kind of energy efficiency opportunities you have, what your benchmark is, where you're at right now, agencies and grant funders appreciate that, and because it helps them do their job. And so it gives you a very, very strong leg up in trying to compete in some of these competitive grant realms.
Are parent-teacher organizations a good source for assistance?
Yes, they are. We talked about some of these local fundraisers, and a lot of times those fundraisers are organized by parent-teacher associations, and the funds go back to the parent-teacher associations to be used at their discretion. They can be used, depending on the priorities of the parent-teacher association. They can be used for anything from installing a tennis court to putting in a running track to adding some different playground equipment to, a whole variety of things. So they're a great source because they represent the priorities of the community, or theoretically, they represent the priorities of the community and of the parents, and those funds are discretionary funds. And so, I think if you have the opportunity to push forward some of the projects that you're interested in, or some initiatives, whether it be the purchase of recycling bins so that each classroom can have a bin within their classroom to recycle their paper, to instituting some type of collection event. I think that these, or to funding curbside recycling, I think these are, it's a great avenue for that. It's a way of getting a little bit of funding if you need it, but also just garnering further support from, and that's always helpful in any of these efforts.
Could you provide a pollution prevention contact for the Wyoming DEQ?
Sure, absolutely. The Solid and Hazardous Waste Division, the department, the DEQ Solid and Hazardous Waste Division lead, I guess would be his title. I'm not sure what his title is Bob Doctor. Bob, D-O-C-T-O-R, and his phone number is 307-473-3468. Craig McOmie is also an individual at the Solid and Hazardous Waste Division within Wyoming's DEQ, and his phone number is 307-473-3487. Those are both good contacts within Wyoming DEQ if you want to find out about recycling efforts. If you want to find out about what kind of audits are available and how you might go about finding someone to do an audit, such that the previous person asked, an additional person to contact is Steve Roseberry, and he is Roseberry, and he's the state P2 coordinator at Wyoming DEQ, and I have his contact in my email, but I don't have it on my sheet here, so I'll post that for us. But you could find his contact information on the DEQ website.
I just have a kind of a housekeeping question now, and that is, are participants able to get CEUs for view if they view the presentations online, or did they need to be able to participate in each one of the 6?
Well, they needed to participate, I believe it was in 5 of the 6, and if they weren't able to participate, I've talked to a couple of individuals that were unable to participate in 1 or 2, and we worked it out where they were able to just view the presentation online, and then they could and then that would qualify. So yes.
That's all I've got for now.
Okay. Great. Well, I'll just go ahead and wrap it up, and thank you again for your participation, for your questions. I hope that that you were able to get something out of these, and I hope that we're able to do this again. So thank you very much. And with that, feel free to, as always, contact me if you have any contact questions or any other related questions, and we'll call it a day. Thanks.
Thanks, Mila.